Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Galaxy. Of Pop Culture Galaxy podcast. This is
We're
take
new at
two.
this. We're
Yeah,
new at this.
we're doing take two. So first recording didn't work out so well. Well, it was the intro. All right, so yeah, we're gonna continue. Oh, I'm Mark Bridge, and I'm here with Zach Wojner.
That's me.
All right, so we're continuing with our James Bond retrospective, and we're talking about The Spy Who Loved Me. Is that one? Is that one we deal with? The Spy Who Loved Me?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
The Spy Who Loved Me.
And it's actually the first movie that title song doesn't feature the name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody Does It Better is the name of the song, right?
Yeah. Carly Simon.
Yeah. It's a good song. Good song. Like I think I was mentioning to you in an earlier podcast that first time I heard that song was in a soap commercial. So I didn't know it was a Bond song until like later in life. But yeah, it's The Spy Who Loved Me came out in 1977. The budget was at 14 million, and I think up until this point, this one was the highest grossing. I think it outgrossed the previous Bond films.
It was a big one. So the behind the scenes is that they were satisfied, but not really. Not sure how sustainable the movies were at this point because Man with the Golden Gun and Live and Let Die, while successful, weren't like the big blockbusters they were hoping for. They were wondering if Bond might never return to the heyday of its 60s. Sean Connery. Oh, is everything after this, after Sean Connery left, just going to be kind of B-tier Bond?
All right.
So they were like, all right, well, let's figure out what to do. And this was the first movie without Harry Saltzman.
Yeah.
And so who was probably a little stingy. And Albert Broccoli was like, hey, man, let's put some money in this. So the budget was the biggest one yet.
Yep.
And also, this is kind of forgotten the way we forget about it with Die Another Day, and the way we're gonna forget about it with Skyfall, is that this was the first milestone Bond. This was movie number 10.
Ah, right.
It was the 15th anniversary and movie number 10, and they were like, let's do a big blowout for this movie. And what their plan was, the legend goes, was let's bring back Blofeld. And so they were gonna do Blofeld, doing another one of his schemes, Spectre. Except there was, this was at the height of the whole, we can't get the rights back because of that whole thing that we've talked about a little bit in the past, and we'll talk about more 2 movies from now. But basically they couldn't get Blofeld, so instead they created a new villain who's basically Blofeld.
Right.
That's Karl Stromberg, played by Kurt Jurgens. And so he has a very Blofeldian plan. I have a big underwater layer called Atlantis, and I kill people by dropping them into shark tanks. That's so Blofeld.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of like, it's a celebration of Bond more than what can we do with Bond this time. It's more like, let's just do Bond, baby. Let's do kind of a similar story to You Only Live Twice, with the capturing the spaceships, except he's capturing the
submarines. Yeah.
And they really pulled out all the stops. This was the first movie where they let Roger Moore be his Bond.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of his best performances. It's one of my, it's really hard for me to pick favorites, like absolute, this is my favorite one. But this is way up there. If I had to have a list, it's easily in my top 3.
Yeah, it was a good film. I enjoyed it. Set pieces were spectacular, especially that layer, the actual ship that they built, which by the way was a miniature or bigature, like on the outside, obviously. And it fooled a lot of Navy captains. They're like, wait, that wasn't real? Holy shit, right?
Yeah, I didn't realize it until, and I've seen this movie, I don't know, 20 times. Not until the last time I watched it with the commentary on the Blu-ray,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, "This is a miniature," and I'm like, "Wait, it is? What? Okay, if you say so."
Yeah, yeah. And then what else? So you mentioned the villain. You have Roger Moore coming back, and you have Lewis Gilbert. This is his second Bond.
After You Only Live Twice.
Right. So his second Bond film. Roger Moore's came back. And then joining him this time is as his Bond girl is Barbara Bach.
Yeah.
Now she plays Anya Amasova, aka Agent Triple X. I like that name, Triple X, Agent Triple X. But I'll say this: she's beautiful. I like the character. Not the best Bond girl. Like I guess it's supposed she's supposed to play the character all calm and demeanor, cool, not too much emotions, I guess. So like personality wise, she's almost like a blank slate. Maybe it's a deliberate choice.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that going on. She's an interesting character because she was maybe, we've seen like hints of it with like Domino,
Mm-hmm.
and Pussy Galore. She's like the idea of a more independent Bond girl who's more than just a trophy for Bond to make out with at the end, and to wear like a sexy outfit while she's being rescued.
Right.
And they're like, we wanted her to do more than that, but we also wanted her to do that.
Yeah.
So like she's capable, but then she gets captured, and she's she wants to kill Bond, but then she winds up making out with him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's one of those, like, it's fair for its day. It's an important step.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good step towards the more self-actualized Bond girls that we'll come to see much later on. But yeah, I could definitely, her performance and her character could feel, because of how big of a step it was, it can feel kind of more dated than what was generally accepted for that era.
Yeah. Now, and correct me if I'm wrong. Again, so we were supposed to record this a long time ago. So it's been like a couple of weeks since I've seen the movie to when we're recording this. So I might have forgotten. Is this the only Bond girl only girl he slept with throughout the whole movie, or did he have like others?
Well, there's the one at the very beginning when he's in the log cabin.
Right. Right, with the big. So
James, I need you.
Yeah.
So does England.
Yeah, and then
so good.
And then you have the spectacular ski stunt with the Union Jack.
That was Rick Sylvester, who is a stuntman, like high diver kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he did that stunt. He rode skis off a cliff.
Yeah.
And parachuted and almost got, and you can see it in the movie, he almost gets one of his skis stuck in the parachute.
Yeah.
And if that had gone wrong, it wouldn't have opened, and he would have probably died.
Yeah.
Million feet to his doom.
And the other thing that went wrong, and that was there were supposed to be 3 cameras that were shooting at the same time, and the only one that captured him was a long, wide-angle camera, and that's just the view. I mean, it was spectacular because you see like it's actually real, but I guess they wanted to have like a camera facing him, moving over, and then one above him going over, so it didn't capture him.
It's interesting because like when you're making movies, you want to have all this coverage so that you can see everything from every angle. Like when you shoot an explosion, you don't want to shoot that explosion twice.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to put this building back together so that we can do a take 2 on that.
Yeah.
So you get as many cameras as you can on it, so you can get every angle. But sometimes, action movies are criticized for cutting between all these different angles. To kind of disguise the fact that nothing is happening.
Yeah.
It's like you use that as like a trick to hide when you didn't really choreograph a big action scene. You just cut really quickly to make it look like there's action happening. Hashtag any Taken sequel.
Yeah.
But for this stunt, the whole thing is just in one camera from like the long the long lead up to the jump, and
Mm-hmm.
opening all the way to the opening credits is you know, just sometimes it's the best way is just the simple, just get a camera on it, keep him centered,
Yeah.
and just let the magic happen.
Mm-hmm.
That is one of the most, uh, Bond movies always have been known for their openings, but in the last couple, you know, Roger Moore's Bond openings really didn't hold a candle. He wasn't even in the Live and Let Die one,
Yeah. Yeah.
and or Man with the Golden Gun barely.
Yeah.
The
It was a
statue.
statue. Yeah.
Um, and so for this, they're like, we have to. We've been slacking.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to step it up.
Let's
And
put Bond back in there.
yeah, it set the precedent not just to be as big as the Sean Connery ones,
Mm-hmm.
but to begin with a game-changing stunt, with
Mm-hmm.
a stunt that would end another movie
Right. Right.
to begin the Bond movie.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's another beautiful lady in this one too. But she played the henchman or henchwoman. Naomi. She played.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. She's
sweet sweet Naomi, sweet tan
gorgeous.
Naomi.
Played by Caroline Monroe. Um, but yeah, she was pretty good in it too. Died through. She was in the helicopter when she died, right? It was
Yeah,
like a
he blew her up with a missile.
yeah. So it was a cool thing too. Um, mention the other actors: Desmond Llewellyn, Q. Well, yeah, Q. Bernard Lee is back, and
The gang's all
yeah,
here.
Louis
Oh,
Maxwell. One scene again.
yeah, yeah. They really didn't take as much advantage of their chemistry as they could have. That's
Yeah.
kind of maybe the biggest failing of the Roger Moore era as a
Yeah.
whole.
Yeah.
Is there should have been more money penny.
As a matter of fact, I don't think she was featured in a scene with Bond in that movie, right? She was just reporting. Again, it's been a couple of weeks. I'm trying to remember.
No, but there was like the opportunity for her to be jealous of Anya,
Right.
because she's the secretary and he's the agent, and it's
Mhm.
like, oh no, now he found like
Mhm.
another agent.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, speaking of that, I loved her introduction, right? And it's funny, like when I used to come up with movie ideas back in the day, I used to come up with this trick, but nowadays it won't work because, like, people expect, um, female leads to be badass, and that they're expecting that, so it's not something that is like the norm. So like when you first get introduced to Agent Triple X, it's you see a woman and a man in bed, and phone is ringing, and you're expecting, and then the guy picks up the phone, I think, or something like that. No, you think the guy is Agent Triple X because the preceding scene was like, we need to contact Agent Triple X. Switches to the scene. He's like, oh yeah, the guy is definitely Agent Triple X, and then
Right.
him sitting up, expecting him to pick up the intercom or whatever, and then he gets out of the bed and she picks it up, and it's like, oh yeah, so that was badass. And I always wanted to do something like that in some stories where you're thinking, the sexy chick is just there to be arm candy to the guy, and then it turns out that the sexy chick is the badass that expecting. So I like that introduction. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've also got Robert Brown, who has a couple of scenes. I think a couple scenes. He
Mhm.
plays the Admiral Hargreaves,
Right.
and he later on, starting with Octopussy, would be playing M.
Oh, right,
Um,
right.
So there's a little bit of, they never say one way or another, but like the headcanon of a lot of Bond fans is that he's the same character who kind of just gets promoted.
Mhm.
Um, Bond never acknowledges that he's a different M.
Yeah.
So some people think that he's just supposed to be playing the same character, but I subscribe to the notion that he's the same character as in The Spy Who Loved Me, just promoted.
Cause wasn't when GoldenEye? Cause GoldenEye, I think GoldenEye was the first Judi Dench film. Was it right? Wasn't it that it's not like they're erasing the previous M. She became the new M, right?
Right, because as we've established, it's all the same continuity,
Yeah.
baby.
And then
In GoldenEye, Bond tells her, he says, "Your predecessor kept, a bottle of whatever,"
yeah.
and she goes, "Yeah, I like this bottle instead."
And then
All right, jeez.
didn't Rafe becomes the
Yeah,
new M,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
it's
although the next Bond, No Time to Die is gonna reveal that he's been the bad guy the whole time.
oh really? Oh, you're
Because
just making that up.
he'd be a much better Blofeld than Christoph Waltz. Just saying, he should have been Blofeld. Um, but there is a nod. I don't even think the camera stops on it. There's not even a still image of it.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a portrait of Bernard Lee as M in The World Is Not Enough.
Oh, I should check that out when I get
So
there.
we'll get there.
Yeah.
9 more.
All right, and then of course, Jaws.
Oh my god.
Jaws.
Richard Keel.
Yeah.
Iconic.
That guy is scary, man. You imagine those things just getting at your neck? It's like, get off me.
And he's got, he's again a way of paying tribute to the past. He's like the ultimate Red Grant figure.
Mm-hmm.
Red Grant is this guy who looks like he's indestructible. Jaws really is indestructible and fights Bond on a train.
Yeah. Oh man, another train fight, right? They just love their train fights.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, Spectre had a train fight, didn't it?
Yes, it did. with the Red Grant character.
Yeah.
He who was, man, as soon as he leaves that movie, it just falls apart.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
Yeah. So a couple of key things. I put some notes on that I wanted to mention about this movie. So I did put love their train fight. They love their train fights. I was like, yeah, this is another train fight. The 2:3:5 aspect ratio is back.
Yeah.
Which signifies we're putting the budget back in, boys.
Where the money is.
I
spend money to make money, baby.
Yep. The car, the Lotus, is Spirit. Nice car, and of course it becomes a submarine, or a mini sub.
And all of those scenes
dope.
Still hold up.
Yep, pretty.
They just did it.
Yeah.
Obviously movie magic, but that's not a miniature.
Yeah.
It's a freaking submarine, dude.
And especially that scene. So the scene when they're in the sub, and then they're fighting against the other things, the car I'm talking about, and then she starts taking control, and I was like, bullshit! How the hell she knows about that? All the controls, but they explain it that they stole the plans previously, and that's how she knows about it. I was like, oh, you lucky! I was about to call you out for that bullshit.
It is still a little bit. They're having it both ways because she doesn't know what's going on when he starts to drive it into the water.
Right.
She's like, "What are you, nuts?" She doesn't say it, but her acting is clearly like, "What are you doing, you crazy English person, you Western depraved monster, capitalist pig?" And she, or maybe it's just like, oh, she. Oh, now I remember. Right?
Yeah. That's what I was saying. Yeah, you could. She's been on so many missions. Once in a while she forget.
Adrenaline of the moment,
And then when it goes in the car, it's like, oh yeah, I remember this thing I stole. So that was one. Another thing too. So the music by Marvin Hamlish.
Yeah, Marvin Hamlish, who's a super famous, beloved composer.
He straight went disco with this. Jesus Christ.
Yes, he is. Yeah. So it's a little. I remember when I was a kid, it was the most dated element of the movie.
Right.
And as an adult, it's still probably the most
dated
element of the movie.
Yeah.
I do appreciate it more than I did back then.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not. It's funny because it's not Marvin Hamlish later on in For Your Eyes Only. It'll be Bill Conti, another guy who did freaking Rocky.
Right.
Another extremely dated score. That we'll get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's dated, but it's a thing where you just have to submit to its energy.
Yeah.
If you can submit to its energy, then you can have a great time. But if you just can't get over that hump, if you can't
Yeah.
get over that barrier, then you're not gonna have as good a time.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I'm wondering, right? Okay, so in the '70s, obviously disco was a thing in the '70s, so they kind of emulated the score to reflect that time period. That was disco's hot, so let's make the score disco esque and played it in nightclubs, whatever, right? This the '80s. I don't know. I'll get to it, but I know the song "View to a Kill" does sound '80s,
Oh yeah.
right? But will the score reflect that? I'm not sure yet when I get to it. But then in the '90s now, when you had the kind of beginning of synth pop a little bit in the '90s with rock riffs, and of course mainly you saw that in commercials, but maybe it was in a movie. I'm not too sure with the Pierce Brosnan movies, but like the kind of techno-esque
Oh yeah. I
spin.
mean, we'll get there,
Yeah.
but
So I'm just wondering if, like, when I get to that, will it feel as dated, or will it feel like, what, you can still rock those score today. You know what I mean?
for this movie and for the Pierce Brosnan movies, which we'll get to, they might be dated, but
Mm-hmm.
they fit the movie.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if Roger Moore was going down that mountain with a very dramatic, serious score
Yeah.
while wearing, red boots and a yellow jumper,
Mm-hmm.
it would be a different energy
Yeah.
than him looking like a freaking glow stick
Right.
while uh, you know doing amazing stunts. And there's some sick stunts, even not including the final jump.
Mm-hmm.
He does that like corkscrew backflip.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just nuts. Um, yeah, we'll get to the scores. Like David Arnold, I think
Yeah. I
is
like.
10 out of 10.
Yeah.
I think his scores are the best, and I think that it was BS when he got replaced by freaking Sam Mendes for Skyfall and Spectre. But that's another
Mm-hmm.
conversation.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, those scores, and it's weirdly juxtaposed with like the theme song "Nobody Does It Better," which is one of the earthiest themes
Mm-hmm.
in the whole series.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like the antithesis of that. Um, yeah, so the scores, yeah, maybe it sounds like I'm making excuses, but like it is a good score, but it's not what you would today expect from a Bond movie.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe even back then it was, I don't know how well received the score was at the time. I know they released Bond 77 as a single.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They did it on purpose. You could tell. You eat like from the moment I heard it, it was like, oh yeah, they released this as a single. It's the '80s. I mean the '70s. They wanted to take advantage of the disco, disco craze.
Yeah,
Release a
hey, they
disco
did it with
version.
Star Wars too.
Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
didn't put it in the freaking movie.
Yeah, right.
It's yeah.
It's crazy.
And they totally could have put it over the end credits if they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
George Lucas could have been like, the kids will love it.
The other thing that I noted. Okay, so you watch the climax taking place in the ship, and you have all these soldiers, and all right. So the main motivation for the bad guy, he wants to destroy land so we can create underwater, which is very intriguing, right? It's like we're 70% in water, but like nobody ever thought let's build homes underwater. Like, I mean, it would be great.
Oh, I think they've thought about it. I don't think they've ever been approved by OSHA.
Right. Well, I think OSHA. OSHA is more work
Or-
injury.
I
I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, but like it's like, but who has a
Department of the Interior.
but who has a it's a lot of water is unclaimed, right? It's like international waters. Like nobody's claimed. It's like who owns the Pacific? Who owns the Atlantic? Who owns what's the other ones? There's two more, right?
Indian Ocean,
Yeah,
Arctic Ocean.
right. Who owns those?
Yeah.
Nobody, right? It's like you're in international waters. You can shoot somebody in the head and get away with it, right? No, I may be wrong.
I don't think so. I
Yeah.
think that there is, I don't know, Interpol.
Or some maritime shit. I don't know. It's some law like it's up to the like if you're on a ship and you're in the ocean, you're subject to the laws of that ship, and if it's an American ship, you're subject to the American law. That's some shit. Um, but then if you're on a boat and you shoot somebody in the head and throw them, I don't know, some shit. But anyway, what was I saying? So the idea behind destroying the entire land to make ocean the numero uno in terms of land space or whatever. You have all these soldiers, right? How does this guy recruit? Like, what's their mentality, right? Where does he get these henchmen, right? To go along with it, because you see them like willingly die for this cause. Like, there's a shit ton of them. Like, to wield that kind of power to influence all these people to say yes, believe in my cause. Like, holy shit! Like, I'm trying to think. What's the thought process in getting all these henchmen? Like, where do you find them?
Well, I mean, these days it's just private military company. Like,
Right.
I don't care as long as you're paying.
Right. But before that, before big corporations, before the internet, before Twitter, before you can recruit online, and like, how do you find these people? You know what I mean?
I guess he just pays them. He just pays them.
Yeah.
He's rich.
Yeah. It's just something that was occurred to me. I was watching that whole fight scene, and how they have the shield. They close the shield doors to the main command room, and they're trying to infiltrate, and they like have the little slit slots, and the soldiers are shooting through that slots. Basically, they're protecting this place with their lives, man. And it's like, where do you find them? Where do you find such dedication? That has always occurred to me.
It's one of those, it's like a Blofeld thing where it's like, how do you hire people to be inspector? It's like, they're bad guys, dude. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. But yeah, I like the.
No. And then someone has to ask, and then they're like, oh no, but like, what if there's like a real like deep explanation? Like, what if he's like Bond's brother or something?
Right. But yeah, it was cool to wonder about that. What else can we talk about this movie? Cool action.
Flips the tie.
Which one?
When he's fighting the guy on the roof, the bald guy, and he's got him hanging off the roof, and he's holding onto his tie, and he's like, "Where's Peckish?"
Oh, right.
He's like, "Oh, it's at the pyramids."
Yeah.
So many great one-liners.
Mm-hmm.
Really, like, Roger Moore, I think, is the most underrated Bond.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe George Lazenby, but he never really had time to settle into the role.
Mm-hmm.
But like, this is like the example of when you let someone settle into the role. Like, Roger Moore started off pretty strong, even though I don't like Live and Let Die. I think that he is good in it.
Right.
And a lot of people don't like The Man with the Golden Gun, but I think that he is good in it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he really is extremely comfortable as Bond in The Spy Who Loved Me.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows all those so many great little moments, little character moments that you get, especially when he's, he always saves Amasama, Anya, but their best scenes together are where she matches him, usually in dialogue.
Right.
There's that great bit where they're piecing together the evil plan, and he's like, "Oh, it stands for laboratory." And he's like, "No, it stands for this," or however that goes.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Good job, James." "Oh, good job, Triple X." And I was like, "All right, you guys." And when they first have their big meetup in the bar, she recognizes him and gives him reads his dossier back to him. She says, "Oh, you're this, that. You had a wife. Your wife was killed." And he's like, "All right."
Yeah.
And that's such a great little character moment to be like, he still carries all that with him because he's the same guy, baby. Um, and was it later? Oh my gosh, so good. I'm trying to remember what the context is for it, but when I believe it's when they're fighting Jaws in the car.
Yep, yep.
She says, "Shaken, not stirred,"
Mm-hmm.
and he like rolls his eyes in like a, "Ah, shit, you totally got me there."
Yeah.
Oh boy. Um, and what's super funny about that also is that Roger Moore never actually orders vodka martini shaken not stirred.
Yeah, I think they even mentioned that in the behind the scenes, in that they tried to avoid that in order to avoid the whole Sean Connery thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, where they're like, let's not mention any of his catchphrases other than Bond, James Bond, I guess. Let's try not to to emulate too much of Sean Connery, and then of course he became his own Bond. So yeah, a bit of a side note. Before they got Louis Gilbert, they approached Steven Spielberg to do this one.
Wow.
Which I guess that's how his kind of fetish to do a James Bond movie came about, and then George said, "No, man, I got something way better than Bond for you," and then gave him Indiana Jones. Um, Imagine Spielberg doing a Bond movie. That would be dope, right? No, maybe.
That would have worked,
W-
especially the Roger Moore era. I think he totally could have nailed it.
and would John Williams have scored it? A John Williams Bond
Whoa,
score. Holy shit, right?
that would be rad.
As a matter of fact, I think the closest you probably could get to what John Williams Bond score would sound like was "Catch Me If You Can."
Hmm.
Maybe that would have been like an indication of what he would have done, because he's like a jazz. He was John Williams was a jazz man, so he kind of would have infused a little bit of that. He put that a little bit of that in "Catch Me If You Can," and of course, if you listen to the score, the original, it does have a little bit of a jazzy feel to it, right? Right? Yeah, so Spielberg. Oh, but it went to Louis
He could
Gilbert.
do it. He could come back.
Nah, I think that passed.
Why not?
Just like Star Wars, they approached him to do Return of the Jedi, and because he was a member of the guild and some bullshit, he didn't get to do it.
Yeah,
Uh,
he wanted to do episode 2 also.
yeah, so I think
He wanted George Lucas wanted Martin Scorsese to do episode 3.
that would have been dope.
He said, "I want to do part 1, you do part 2, and you do part 3." But then they talked him into doing all 3.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Why did they do? Oh,
well, because he wouldn't have been able to let them do their thing.
why
He would have.
he would have been side seat driving the whole time?
Yeah.
Mm.
I think that it's said that he did that with Return of the Jedi.
Uh,
And ironically that he wanted to do that with Empire Strikes Back,
mm-hmm.
but Irvin Kershner, yeah, something like he was going through enough personal stuff at the time
Mm-hmm.
where Irvin Kershner was kind of left on his own
Yeah,
comparatively.
yeah.
But George Lucas is a guy who needs that creative control.
Mm-hmm. I mean, would he do that with Steven though? Because I mean, look at Indiana Jones, right? I don't think he's side seat driving with Indiana Jones. He kind of let Steven go on that one.
I don't think he has the same degree of personal ownership
Of
over Indy than he does over Star Wars.
Oh, okay.
Like, Spielberg did help. It said that he helped with pre-production on the Vader Obi-Wan fight in Episode 3.
Right. So I'm saying. So he brought in. As a matter of fact, there was a behind the scenes footage of the first one, Episode 1, and he brought Spielberg onto the scene on the set, and they were walking around. I remember that in the documentary, and they were basically having a whole conversation about how these new droids operate and what they should do and stuff like that. And I think he even advised him on the pod racing scene, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, why not? I mean, I'm sure if Spielberg did it, he would. They're close enough that maybe their minds are simpatico where he wouldn't necessarily have to intervene. Spielberg would know what the Star Wars world is and what it needs.
Yeah, I think George is good with having people come on to advise. I don't think he's good with not being the one to call the shots.
Right, right. Yeah, I just wish I had seen a Spielberg directed episode 2 and Martin Scorsese.
I mean, episode 3 could have been good.
This would have been Martin's first sci-fi movie or fantasy movie or genre film.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh my god, I have so much hype for The Irishman. It's gonna be so good.
I mean, but it's back to basics for him though, right?
Well, but sort of. It's like the most low key, $200 million driven movie.
Yeah.
This movie's gonna look so cheap. It costs $200 million.
Yeah. Right. So yeah.
If you can't tell, then that's the magic.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of excitement.
Yeah.
Martin Scorsese, James Bond. James fucking Bond.
Yeah. I mean, I think those guys like
starring Leonardo DiCaprio as James Bond.
They've passed. Yeah, I think they're just like. I think the only big director right now that still has his eyes set on Bond is, you know who. Nolan.
Yeah, maybe.
Like I think. I mean, if Nolan doesn't direct the next Bond after Daniels is finished, then he's not gonna do it.
I hope he doesn't. I don't want it.
You don't want to see
it? No, I don't want it. I already got it. We got Skyfall. I don't need another one of those.
But maybe he won't do his. Maybe he'll change up for this.
I would like that very much, but I don't.
Because the thing is, he kind of did his Bond stuff with what you call it, that movie? Inception, and the third Batman movie. So he kind of got his Bond stuff out, and then of course Tenet. We don't know what Tenet is about. Maybe Tenet will be just like a Bond movie, and then he'll exercise all of that muscle. So when he does get a Bond movie, maybe it'll be completely different.
Yeah,
but
although I think that Bond is so producer driven, that they don't want necessarily a director who's gonna have that. Well, although you would think, but then they did that with Sam Mendes, and it's weird because I appreciate them doing that. I like that in theory. I just didn't like his particular approach and how Nolan it was,
right?
And how he had to make everything like a super personal thing with Bond to basically turn into text what had always been subtext.
Yeah.
And then want like awards and kudos for telling us what we already knew, but for saying it in such a way that even like the rubes and the cheap seats could hear it.
Yeah, I guess.
But at this point, that's also just like my own hang-ups.
Yeah, and I guess another thing that would be difficult in getting someone like Nolan. How do you market that movie without putting from director Chris Nolan? Because none of the Bond movies ever did that. Not even with Sam Mendes, like. From the director of American Beauty or so. Did they? No, they didn't, right? Right?
And I think Carrey is a really good choice because he's got that kind of that indie cred, that storytelling cred, but he's also not unproven, but hasn't had the opportunity to stretch his legs with 150 million.
Yeah.
Or however much they're going to spend on this. Because a lot of these directors, they have ideas for action. They just never have the money to do it.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm sure that he had so many ideas for shootouts and car chases for True Detective, but we're just like, we don't have the money for that, so we're just gonna have to make these scripts really good.
Yeah.
And you got some. I think that he's a good choice. Nicholas Winding Refn was considered for more than one Bond movie, and he ultimately decided against it because he didn't want to have complete control.
He didn't, or he did?
He did not want to have complete control.
Right.
He was like, I can't do it if it's not going to be 100% mine.
But I don't know. Would he have made it? Because I've been watching the show he did for Amazon.
Too Old to Die Young. I've seen the first one, and I think it's amazing.
Yeah, the first episode I saw it, up to the second, because the first episode is basically feature length, right?
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, most of them are feature length,
Yeah.
and it's very, his style is very distinct in all his movies. Drive, Only God Could Judge Me, and this is pretty
Oh,
much
Only God Forgives is in my top
Only God
five.
Forgives. Sorry, right?
I love that movie.
So it's like, will he would he have approached Bond that way, or would he have changed up? You know what I'm saying?
Well, it would have been Ryan Gosling as Bond.
First American Bond.
He'd be naked for the
Mhm.
entire movie, covered in blood,
Mm-hmm.
and he'd reach behind him and pull out a PPK.
Yeah, I think he's too dark for a Bond movie. But I would have been interested to see what he would have did with Bond though.
It's one of those things where, like, yeah, these directors have a style,
Mm-hmm.
but if they're given the opportunity and want to take advantage of that opportunity, like, they know how to color inside the lines if they want. Like they color inside their own lines,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that for some directors, it's like a challenge and an opportunity to be able to color in, play in someone else's sandbox. I think that's why, the MCU attracts more, directors who want to play in that sandbox.
Yeah.
And, although even a better example, because they pick a lot of unproven talent
Mhm.
because they're so producer driven.
Yeah.
A better example might be the DC movies, where even though they have not all been successful in that, almost none of them have been good, but they get these directors and they're like, we want a little bit you, we want a little bit us,
Right.
let's mix it up.
Yeah. I think the problem with the DC, they gave a little bit more to the directors than the producers.
Maybe it's like it's
Yeah.
one of those things where something was off in that cocktail.
Mhm.
Like they promised them more up front than they were willing to give by the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that might be part of it. I mean, I don't think it's fair to blame David Ayer for Suicide Squad. They
No.
gave him like a week to write that script.
Mm.
I exaggerate a little bit, but
Yeah.
like the stories about the behind the scenes of that movie are nuts. Like they talk about release the Snyder cut. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
at
Give
least
us.
he had a Snyder cut.
Yeah. And then and the other directors, because you were talking about the MCU, I like the fact, if you look at the first two Joe Russo Marvel movies versus the second two, I think they managed to transition from sort of this gritty spy-esque look for their movies to the bigger cosmic level adventure that Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame were, respectively. So, like, would Nicholas do that? Will Nicholas go from Only God Forgives and Drive to banner, right? Without sort of like,
I think
yeah.
I think he could.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he wants to right now.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that in the future he might, if they're still willing to take a chance.
Yeah, I mean, we're in this kind of reality now, especially with streaming service and everything, where art is becoming elevated to the point where your movies and your television shows are on the same spectrum of sort of like love and passion, sometimes budget, right? And James Bond has not only competition from the television world, but it has competition with 54-year-old what's his name, Tom Cruise, who's still killing it with the Mission Impossible movies. He has 2 more coming out.
Haley Atwell,
right? Oh, awesome. You have to elevate Bond a little bit. You're gonna have to switch it up. You can't go back to the Roger Moore and Sean Connery days. It's not gonna go. You know what I'm saying? Especially.
well, I think they could. I think.
Well, the thing is, what's his name did it? Matthew Vaughn did it, right? And with Kingsman. But that's what I'm saying. It's like, if you go back, you're like, okay, so you're gonna follow Kingsman, but Kingsman was kind of like taking a more self-aware approach to it.
Well, it doesn't have to be. I mean, I wouldn't want it to be an outright comedy.
Right.
I want it to be. Like that there's that article that keeps on giving for me. Fast and Furious is the new James Bond. You know, Bond went in one way
Right.
and just left this big hole where there used to be Bond movies.
Mm-hmm.
And Fast and Furious was like, we're gonna do that.
Yeah.
And obviously it's different, but
Yeah.
you know, that the core idea of that old school Bond of just like, let's just go on a wild adventure and have a lot of fun and have a lot of like sexy girls and you know, crazy stunts that you can't even imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Fast and Furious does that, and Bond is Blofeld's brother. Good for you.
Yeah.
But I think like the core message, like the core takeaway that I get from The Spy Who Loved Me, and it's kind of for Bond as a whole, is really just stick with it. Just keep chipping away.
Yeah.
Like you can, you know, Bond is this character that is always going to be relevant because he's so broad, but there's so much depth. Like he's so immediately appealing, but if you look really close, you can see a lot more than he's ever gotten credit for.
Right.
In the way actors have played him, and in the way the character's been written over the past 57 years. You know, with The Spy Who Loved Me, like they could have done what they did with George Lazenby. I mean, there's a lot more politics to that situation, but they're basically like, that didn't work. Let's get Sean back. Let's undo what we did.
Imagine if they did that. Oh my God.
Yeah. You know, George Lazenby could have been the best Bond ever if they had stuck with it.
Yeah.
You know, and Roger Moore is arguably my favorite Bond. You know, I really do like them all, even Daniel Craig.
Yeah.
I think it's good to have, like, you know, you have a handsome Bond and you have an ugly Bond.
Yeah.
You gotta have a Bond who looks like he got beaten by an ugly stick. You know, to mix it up.
Yeah.
But so like my point is like that, you know, they stuck with Roger Moore and they were like, let's try this now. Let's try this. Let's go in this direction. Let's let him get comfortable in the role. Let's let him have a degree of control over the character. Let's pay tribute to what came before without like overindulging in it the way Skyfall does. And
too hard on that movie. Can't wait to get to it again.
Yeah, I am too hard on that movie. There's a passion, but I do like it. I just don't like it. but yeah, that's basically my point, and a big part of why I love Spy Who Loved Me, because it's just a celebration of Bond that does new things, but is also, it never loses sight of what we love about Bond, which is that vicarious, let's go to these exotic locations, let's make out with all these beautiful ladies, let's kill all the bad guys, and let's have a good time and look gorgeous while we do it.
Yeah, so I think that should wrap it up for this edition. I like that movie. What's the next one? Octopussy?
Moonraker.
Moonraker.
The end credits of this movie say that the next one is going to be For Your Eyes Only.
Right.
But then a little movie came out called Star
Wars.
and Albert Broccoli was just like, I got an idea.
Yeah.
We'll see that pan out. A little teaser for better and worse. Minor spoiler for next week's episode.
Is that where the
I really like Moonraker.
You like it? You said?
Yeah.
Is that where the term like everything will end up in space eventually? Did it start from here? Did it start from there?
Probably.
Jason in space. Go ahead.
Yeah, because Bond. I don't know how many times Bond has jumped the shark, but he just keeps on jumping that shark.
Yep.
He doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
He's just like, yeah, I'm gonna jump that shark. What are you gonna do about it?
Yeah. If Fast and the Furious 10, because I think they're making 2 more. If Fast and Furious 10 don't end up in space, we're gonna riot.
We're gotta go to space.
We're gonna riot.
Like, you gotta do it just because they say if you do it, it'll be dumb.
But that's the thing, though. People are expecting it to the point where they actually want it now. They're actually gonna be disappointed if they don't go to space in the 10th one. Like, it's gonna be expected, and if it's the last one, fuck it, right?
In that case, the last one has to just be like Drive. It has to be Nicholas Winding Refn should turn down Bond and do Fast and Furious.
Right?
Be that whole thing where that woman sued.
Yeah.
She saw Drive and was like, I thought it was gonna be like Fast 5.
Yeah.
And she sued them for like false advertising.
Yeah.
He should do Fast and Furious now.
We'll see. We'll see.
With Ryan Gosling as his character as the villain.
Didn't they? Nah, maybe because you could. It's not Universal didn't do Drive, did they?
Yeah, they couldn't sell the rights.
Yeah.
They're not doing anything with the IP.
Gotta be cool if that's in the same universe, maybe.
That's how they do it.
Yeah.
See, Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Oh, that's coming up really. Tom Welling. I mean, Erica Durance isn't a big because she showed up already as the mom for Kara. She's Kara's mom.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you didn't get there yet.
No, I'm only like 6 episodes in. I've been very slow.
Oh no! Well, of what, the last season? Yeah.
Oh, on right. Because she replaced the Broadway.
Yeah.
Whose name I can't remember right now. But
Yeah.
Who
So
plays Melania Trump on Colbert?
Oh right, really?
Yeah, the one who played the mom in Astra, originally in Supergirl.
Yeah.
Right, I know that Eric Durance plays her now.
Yeah. So that wasn't like a big like.
But I haven't gotten to Lois in Smallville yet.
Yeah. So, she's back and Tom Millen's back. I'm so excited. Oh my god.
No word on Rosie yet.
Probably not good. Well, maybe they're keeping that on wraps.
Because they gotta get Rosie.
And the thing is, he's big. He's like a big supporter of Smallville and DC. Like he has a podcast.
Like all the time.
Yeah.
I listen to both of his podcasts.
Yeah, so I wouldn't see why he would turn it down. Like, I mean, he probably be a douchebag and turn it down. Who knows? Yeah. But yeah, I'm super excited for Crisis on Infinite Earth. I'm super excited for it.
They got to get James Bond in there.
Huh?
I don't know.
Okay.
Just saying.
Right.
Just to bring up, just so that this isn't a completely superfluous tangent. So
hey, they know our style already. Screw it.
gotta get Bond on Infinite Earths.
Yeah.
Crisis on Infinite Bonds. You get Sean Connery. You get Roger Moore. You get Pierce Brosnan.
Into the Bondverse.
Into the Bondverse.
Right.
Starring Idris Elba. Boom.
Then we go sci-fi with it.
Blew it wide open.
Yep. Alright, before we get too far off, let's end it. You can find this podcast on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, comment down below. Ring the bell to get notification when new videos drop. You can find me on Twitter at Marky Tundra. Where can people find you?
Give us money on Patreon.
I don't got a Patreon
Do we have
yet.
a Patreon?
Not yet.
We'll have one.
We're working on it. When we
get those views,
get
those likes, when we reach 80 million subscribers, we will start. How many do we have now?
2. No, that's kidding.
Okay,
We got like
so
50.
We're close.
Yeah.
Give us another week.
Yeah. So where can people find you at?
Find me on Twitter at my name Zach Wojner, and you can read my work at ScreenRant.com. I've got a bunch. By the time you are watching this, there will be a ton of interviews going up, and we'll have New York Comic Con stuff as well.
Sweet. Yeah, so stay tuned for next episode where we deal with Moonraker and check out how that worked out. All right?
Yeah. The giant snake. You don't even remember the giant snake, do you?
No. So until next time, folks.
I don't even know if I'm being serious or not.
Hey, I don't know. I seen the movie like one time, and it was a long time ago when I first got the set. So,
you're like, is he doing a bit?
Yeah.
You're gonna be looking out for the giant snake.
I'm going to be looking out for the giant snake.
And you're gonna be like,
"Where's the giant snake? You lied to me." No, just kidding.
You're gonna have to wait and see.
Let's see.
Teaser.
Right. So until next time, folks. I want to say peace.
Indeed. Totally a giant snake.
Oh. I'm gonna check it out. I'm